My wife gaslit me into thinking I was a cold husband. But a dropped napkin at family dinner revealed she was breeding a secret life with my younger brother. For 2 agonizing years, my wife Ella made me feel like a ghost in my own home, constantly weeping that I was emotionally dead, cold, and entirely incapable of loving her. She weaponized my own insecurities so perfectly that I spent thousands of dollars on marriage counseling, kept a journal to track my own emotional flaws, and bought her expensive bouquets of lilies every Friday just to watch them rot untouched on the kitchen counter. I honestly believed I was the villain breaking her heart, completely oblivious to the fact that her tears were nothing but a beautifully orchestrated smokescreen. The brutal reality didn't hit me until a routine Sunday dinner at my parents' house. A night that permanently fractured my family and left me staring into an abyss of pure evil. We were sitting around the crowded dining table, my mother passing a roast chicken while my younger brother, Steve, laughed loudly at one of my father's old jokes. In the middle of the noise, my linen napkin slipped off my lap and slid under the table. I bent down to retrieve it, and time instantly stopped as my eyes adjusted to the dim light beneath the tablecloth. Right there, directly across from my chair, Steve's hand was buried high up on Ella's bare thigh, his thumb slowly stroking her skin while her manicured fingers were tightly locked into his. Her nails dug into his jeans in a rhythmic, possessive motion. I sat back up so fast I nearly choked on my breath, the happy chatter of my family suddenly sounding like muffled, distorted static. Ella casually took a slow sip of her white wine, turned to my mother, and complimented her cooking without a single flicker of guilt on her face, while Steve kept eating his dinner with the calm, relaxed demeanor of a sociopath. I didn't say a word for the rest of the evening, clamping my jaw shut until my teeth cracked, driving us home in a suffocating, heavy silence. The moment we got back to our apartment, Ella immediately rolled her eyes, sighed dramatically, and said, "There you go again, Liam. Just sitting there like a block of ice, ruining another family evening with your miserable energy." That night, after she fell into a deep, peaceful sleep, the sheer terror of what I had witnessed under that table drove me to do something I had never done in our 5 years of marriage. My hands shook so violently I could barely input her passcode, but the moment her phone unlocked, my entire world turned to ash. Hidden inside a calculated vault app was a year-long archive of explicit photos, dirty videos, and a relentless stream of text messages between my wife and my brother. They hadn't just been sleeping together, they had been mocking me. They traded screenshots of my desperate, apologetic text messages from my therapy days, laughing at how pathetic and easy I was to manipulate. In one message, Steve wrote, "Let him keep paying for those expensive dinners, it saves me money for our weekend trips." To which Ella replied, "He's so convinced he's the broken one that he'll never see us coming. I'm draining the joint savings next month." They were actively planning to completely ruin me financially before blindsiding me with divorce papers, using her complaints about my emotional coldness to keep me constantly off balance and defensive. A blinding, toxic madness took over my mind, completely swallowing my grief and replacing it with a vicious desire for mutual destruction. I didn't want to just file for divorce, I wanted to shatter Ella's reality the exact same way she had shattered mine. I knew that Ella's childhood best friend, Eleanor, had been harboring a desperate, poorly hidden crush on me for years, always lingering a little too long in my personal space and shooting me hungry looks whenever Ella left the room. I decided to turn Eleanor into my ultimate weapon of revenge, sending her a late-night message claiming that Ella was being distant and that I desperately needed someone to talk to. Eleanor didn't hesitate for a second, practically flying over to a local hotel bar to meet me, pouring out her heart about how she had always wished she had found a man like me instead of Ella. I leaned into her desperation, playing the part of the wounded, neglected husband, and allowed her to pull me into her bed, using her body as a twisted tool to execute my retribution. My plan was simple, cruel, and completely desperate. I was going to string Eleanor along, catch Ella in her lie, and then reveal that her own best friend was sleeping with her husband, forcing Ella to feel the agonizing burn of a double betrayal. But my elaborate, vengeful trap backfired in the most humiliating way possible because I completely underestimated just how little I actually mattered to her. 3 days later, I orchestrated the final confrontation at our apartment, intentionally inviting Eleanor over under the pretense of a group dinner, waiting until the exact moment Ella walked through the front door. I stood in the center of the living room, threw a thick stack of printed phone records and explicit text messages onto the coffee table, and grabbed Eleanor's hand tightly right in front of my wife's face. I braced myself for the explosion, expecting Ella to scream, cry, or look at her best friend with utter betrayal. Instead, Ella looked at the papers, looked at our intertwined hands, and let out a sharp, mocking laugh that echoed coldly against the walls. "Did you really think sleeping with Eleanor would hurt me, Liam?" Ella said, her voice dripping with sheer amusement as she threw her keys onto the counter. "I've been trying to find a way to get both of you out of my life for months. You can keep her, Liam. She's always been desperate for my leftovers anyway." Eleanor choked on a sob, her face turning crimson as she realized she had been completely used by both of us as a pawn in a war she didn't understand, and she ran out of the apartment, slamming the door behind her. But the true, devastating climax of the night came a second later when the front door clicked open again, and Steve walked right in, using his own spare key to our home, and stood shoulder to shoulder with my wife. He didn't look remorseful. He didn't look ashamed, he just looked at me with a smirk of pure victory. "It's over, Liam," Steve sneered, crossing his arms over his chest. "Ella is leaving you, and there isn't a damn thing your pathetic revenge plot can do to stop it. And you might as well hear the rest of it since you love playing detective so much." Ella turned to my brother, a soft, radiant smile breaking across her face. A smile full of warmth that she had never once given me during our entire marriage, and she gently placed her palm over her stomach. "I'm pregnant, Liam," Ella said quietly, looking me dead in the eye with absolute indifference. "And it's Steve's baby. We've already packed my things while you were out playing games with Eleanor. We're leaving for Canada tomorrow morning, and we are never coming back to this miserable town." The room tilted on its axis, and the air left my lungs completely. The revelation that my wife was carrying my brother's child, the very child I had begged her to try for while she spent years telling me I was too cold and broken to ever be a proper father, completely destroyed whatever was left of my sanity. I stood there, utterly paralyzed, watching my own brother walk into my bedroom, drag out 2 massive suitcases they had hidden away, and walk out of my life forever with my wife on his arm. Within 48 hours, they had legally drained our joint accounts to the absolute maximum allowed limit, signed over her half of the apartment deed through an online notary to avoid a lengthy court battle, and boarded a one-way flight to Ontario, completely erasing themselves from our lives. The fallout was catastrophic. My parents were completely broken by the news, the revelation that one son had stolen the wife and fathered a child with the other completely tearing our family dynamic apart. Our traditional Sunday dinners, once filled with warmth and laughter, became silent, hollow, and unbearable, haunted by the ghost of Steve's monstrous betrayal. I spent the next year living like a complete zombie, going to my corporate job, staring at the blank walls of my empty apartment, and trying to scrub the psychological trauma of their malice out of my mind. 2 years have passed since that night, and the long, agonizing winter of my life has finally started to thaw. The divorce was finalized in their absence, and I eventually sold the apartment, packing only a single duffel bag of clothes and relocating to a completely quiet town on the opposite side of the country where nobody knew my name or my history. I completely cut ties with Eleanor, who tried to send me endless letters of apology, recognizing that our brief, toxic encounter was nothing but a mutual mistake born from anger. A few weeks ago, my mother received an unprompted email from Steve containing a photograph of a little girl with bright blue eyes, bundled up in a pink winter jacket against the Canadian snow. My mother showed it to me with trembling hands, her eyes searching my face for pain, but as I looked at the image of my niece, who was also the child of the woman who destroyed my life, I realized something incredible. I felt absolutely nothing. No anger, no hatred, no urge to scream at the sky. The emotional coldness Ella had spent years accusing me of having had finally become a reality, but it wasn't a curse. It was a beautiful, protective shield. I handed the phone back to my mother, stepped out onto the porch of my new home, and took a deep breath of the clean air.